Viltrox recently released a 50mm f1.8 for full-frame mirrorless cameras, but is it still a good lens for videographers and filmmakers? Let's find out. Hey guys, Too Long Didn't Read Filmmaker here, where the answers comes first, the reasons come last, but we're constantly and always still learning. I want to thank Viltrox for sending me out this lens so I can provide you with my review today. So without further ado, let's throw up that TLDR timer right up here because this is everything you need to know about this lens. Coming in at $379, this lens is near the same price point as all the other Viltrox primes. It has similar all-metal designs, minus the lens hood, with a metal mount and a USB port for firmware updates. The aperture ring is the same as before, where you can either manually pull it or leave it on auto and have the camera set it. When it comes to the focus throw, we are looking at approximately 270 degrees of focus throw, which is great for video work. I'm also happy to report that Viltrox has not changed their focus mapping. Everything is mapped out and linear, so you can repeat focus anytime. It would be nice in the future if they actually make these lenses have hard stops. When it comes to autofocus performance, on my A7 III it does quite well tracking me as I come towards the camera. If you take a look at the test again and look at the sides, you'll see a very small amount of focus breathing for these types of focus pulling shots, and in my opinion, it's really not enough to worry about for any types of regular filming. When it comes to flares, direct sources will have this ghost aura around it, and as you move a little further to the side, you'll see a couple orbs, and once you get to the extreme sides, you'll see that light burst that we saw in the 24mm. Now, I'm not a photographer, but here are some 24 megapixel images blown up to 400%. At wide open, it seems in the center that we might have some edge sharpness that is lost. Now, this could be user error as the LCD on my screen is not that great for critical focus. But when you stop it down to f2.8 and so on and so forth, it does sharpen up and you get some contrast back right away. When it comes to photography vignetting, we do see some, but the moment you step down to f2.8, it clears up right away. And if you're filming in 16:9 or even wider with crop bars, you can see a little bit of that vignette on the sides, and again, it clears up right away at f2.8. All right, let's take a look at the bokeh. We do see some onion patterns going on here, and when you compare it to the 24mm and the 85mm, we see that the 24mm also has the onion ring, and while the 85 Mark II doesn't have any. So some of you might be wondering, hey, what about the Sony 50mm f1.8? It's cheaper, but is it better? Now, I don't personally own this lens, but based on the reviews I have seen and the blogs that I have read, I can safely conclude that no, it is not technically better for filmmakers, and there's one glaring thing why. It is the focus ring. It's not mapped out and it's not linear, which means if you ever want to try to repeat focus manually, you can't. And as a filmmaker, while autofocus is a great tool, when it's in a pinch or for some shots like this where there's not much going on here, there are a lot of cinematic shots that require basically a manual focus pull. And the fact that you can't repeat it on the Sony lens, to me, is a deal breaker for filmmakers. Now, there are other things you can look at too, like flares. The Sony does flare a lot more based on Christopher Frost's tests. And if you look at sharpness, it seems like it's softer wide open compared to the Viltrox. And there is a debate about the motor noise because not in theory, but like basically the Sony, you can actually hear the whir of the motor. It's not super loud to the point where it's going to ruin your audio, but it is there compared to the Viltrox. So those are the things you need to know when you're comparing the two, which basically leads to my bottom line here. The Viltrox is a great filmmaker's lens. It's a 50mm, which people have known and loved. It's wide open at f1.8, which lets in a lot of light. And then of course, lastly, the manual focus is mapped out and linear. So if you're using a Sony camera, or I think they have one for Fuji and Nikon, I believe, the autofocus is going to be great when you need it, but then the manual focus is going to be there when you need it as well. Last but not least, it is sharp at f1.8. And in my opinion, even if it is technically slightly not as sharp for photographers, for a videographer, this is really not a big deal because when we're filming stuff, everything is breathing. There's movement in the shot. So having that slight edge softness is not going to be a big deal in my opinion. And in terms of the slight chromatic aberration you'll see at f1.8 in those high contrast situations, in my opinion, I don't think it actually shows up that much unless you're literally shooting at text. So in any case, at the end of the day, the Viltrox 50mm f1.8 is definitely a lens you should be thinking about if you're wanting to have an autofocus capable lens and a manual focus capable lens for your camera. And hey, that is the end of this video. I do have purchase links down below should you want to use them. And if you do, it does help support the channel so I can provide more tests and reviews for you. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave it down below. I will get to them as fast as I can. Other than that, like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you guys in the next one.